Alrighty, so the first thing that I'm going to do is use a tape measure. I'm going to find the metal that we need for the drill gauge project in the racks. Unfortunately, it seems like we're out, but I have a little scrap in the bandsaw already. So typically what you do is take the chain off, make sure that you find the appropriate material by using a tape measure. And then we take it to the bandsaw and set it up so that it's going to cut the right length. If we're doing lots and lots of lengths, we're going to set up a stop right here. In order to set up this stop, we set from the blade to the length of work that we're looking for. In this case, according to your blueprint, is 4.5 inches. There it is, 4.5. 4.5. Then we lift the bandsaw. We make sure that the feed is shut off. We release the clamp. We pull our stock out till it touches the stop at how many inches again? 4.5 inches. Then we clamp it in. We turn on our bandsaw. I need a key. Darn it, there's no key in the bandsaw. Pause. The keys miraculously appeared in the saw. So we're ready to go, except it was brought to my attention that I forgot something very, very important. PPE. I didn't have my safety glasses on. I can't work in this shop without them. So here, just a second, I want to show you. Oh, they're on! Where do we get these? Out of our toolbox, out of the bookstore, out of the tech shop. We can get them in 3 different places here, and if we don't have them, we can't work in the shop at all. That goes for safety boots too. We gotta have them on. Okay, so now, 4.5 inches. Did you notice I've measured 3 times before I cut so that I don't cut it too short? Now I want to turn this on. I want to make sure that there's coolant. 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 Yeah, coolant. There's no coolant.
You want me to pause again? That tends to help.
Alright, so now we have coolant. We're going to start the saw down, but before it touches off on the cart, we're going to slow it down because we don't want it to feed too quickly. We're going to let it slowly work until the part falls off. Signs that it's not working properly. If the blade stops spinning, it means we've got to lift up gently on it and slow down our feed rate. If it's making a funny noise, sounds like it's clicking and ticking and not doing anything, the blade's probably dull and has some teeth missing. It's time to get the technician over here to check on it. If the coolant isn't working, it's going to tear blades off, teeth off very, very quickly. All right? So we've got our part. Bear in mind that this part is very, very sharp right now. It's got a very, very sharp edge here and here. Before we put the steel back in the rack, we have to take a file and get rid of the sharp edges on our part and on the steel we're putting away so the next guy doesn't get hurt. Okay? Okay, so next, we've got to get rid of this sharp edge And we've got to make it so that it's a nice square surface to work from. So I have this square that is a combination set, and I have a couple of files. One of them is a coarse file. One of them is a smooth file. Coarse removes material very, very quickly. Smooth makes a nice finish and takes the material off a lot slower. I'm going to take my coarse file. I'm going to make sure my work area is safe. I'm going to use the whole file and remove the burr. That burr's gone. It only took 3 strokes. Next, I'm going to go to the fine file. You'll notice the file isn't this way. The file isn't this way. I'm making sure that the file is nice and straight on my part, and I'm using the whole file like so. Every time I take a stroke, it removes material, but it also puts material in the file. So we're supposed to have a file card to clean out the file from time to time. I'm not going to use this long enough to need a file card today, and I'm going to get my technician to help me out by cleaning it later. But just watch. This is the process of removing material. Now if I want to make sure that I'm not taking too much off any area in particular, I go and get a, let's see here, magic marker. These are not made for sniffing, although it might be fun. Don't do it. It's not good. We put a black mark all the way across our part. We take our file and touch in the middle and give it a little push. Now right now I can see all the way along my part it's nice and shiny and not black, except right at the very end here. That means there doesn't need filing, and all along here does, in order to make it so that it's even and matching this black piece. So I take my file and I draw a file. That's using one area on the file sideways and slowly moving the material off, like so. You can see I'm not touching the end. Slowly working my way across. Now right now there's a sharp edge here and here. I could hurt somebody. I take my file, get rid of the sharp edges once in a while. Just take that off so you can't cut yourself on it. I take my square. I go up to the light, and I see that that's perfectly square right now. It's ready to go. The next thing I want to do is clean off my part. I can just take it over to the sink. Here, follow me. Now here's where if you didn't file properly, you're going to learn quickly that you didn't, because you're going to cut yourself. Don't cut yourself. All nice and shiny. We wipe it off so that it doesn't rust. Now that I have a square surface, I'm ready to start laying out lines. Before I lay out lines, I have to put something on it that makes it so that the lines are obvious. If I don't, it's going to leave little silver lines on a silver part. It's going to be hard to see them. I'm going to get something called bluing. I'm going to blue this surface right now, okay? So pause. I found the bluing. Now this bluing doesn't want to get on your clothing. If it does, you're going to be buying new clothing or walking around with bluing on it for the rest of the semester. Alright, so you've already seen me use a file on this thing to square one side, but which side did I square? I kind of forget. Well, I better take my square and double check. That side looks really square. That side does not. Okay, so it's this side right here that's square. And the next thing I want to do is take a hammer and a chisel or a punch or something and identify the corner that is my XZ0 right here. You'll notice there's a little black mark right here. That marks for me already punching this part. When we punch, we make sure that we use a hammer and a punch. That one there's a center punch. It's at an almost 90-degree angle. it's nice and sharp, it's going to do a fine job. But when I tap on something, I want to make sure that I'm not tapping on a granite block because it's going to damage the block. And I'm not tapping on the backside of a vise because it's going to break the vise. I want to find a steel plate. Follow me? Like this one right here. That's nice and safe to tap on and isn't going to do damage to anything. Now I don't hit the plate. We don't leave marks in. We're going to just leave a little mark on our part. Right there. You want to see me do it? I'll do it again. That's all there is to it. Now, that's my witness mark that says that's where I'm going to start measuring from every day. Next thing I want to do is apply bluing. I have a bluing station that is on the west wall of the shop. It's red. It looks like a Varsol bin. For people that are going to make a mess, which I know some of you are, it's a good idea to do this job over there, but I've done this a bazillion times before, so I'm going to just make sure that there is no extra bluing on my brush. I'm going to take the brush and I'm going to gently paint my part. There we go. What's the bluing for? It's to make it so that my layout lines are visible. We want to be able to see them. Now the next thing I want to talk about is all the XZ coordinates that we have to meet. There's a hole here, 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 two here, this one. There's this angle that we have to deal with, and a hole here. And there's a little hidden hole that nobody can see right there. Right there. That's this radius. If we leave a mark there, the file can't get it out again. So what we're going to do is take a little piece of Scotch tape and put it right here. We're going to take another piece of Scotch tape, put it right here, just for practice. And we're going to scribe the line that goes around this radius and beyond a little bit, and this radius here and beyond a little bit, so that we can join the two on this straight line. Right? So why is the tape here? So that we don't leave a mark in our part that doesn't come out again. Pause it. It was brought to my attention that it might be kind of hard for you to fathom what's going on by looking at a flat piece of steel. So I brought a drill gauge that's 80% complete. It doesn't have any writing on it. It hasn't had holes tapped in it. It doesn't have any indications on here as to the length of the land on the drill bit. But this is the part that you're going to be making. If I hold this on here, you can see that the piece of steel that I cut is slightly larger than the piece we're going to have at the end. Make sure you measure your part before we go any further, because if it's too short, your drill gauge project is going to be a little bit short. Bring it to your teacher's attention. He will amend your blueprint right now for the length of your part so that we don't have to waste steel in cutting a new piece. Okay, everybody should understand that. There are no sharp edges on my part, whoops, except that one that I just dropped. So, next I'm going to lay out all the lines that I need in order to make that part, and I'm going to get you to follow me into the classroom area to do that. Okay, so the next part of the project, as I just said, is laying out from our XZ0 areas. And we're going to measure height. This tool is a vernier height gauge. It has measurements on it at 50 thousandths of an inch apart. In order to divide those 50 thousandths into smaller increments, we have a scale on here. It'll divide it into 1 thou increments. 1 thou is 1/4 of the thickness of a hair. Okay? You need to read the chapter that covers this in Technology of Machine Tools, your textbook. If you haven't purchased it yet, you're kind of dead in the water right now. We just can't do this project. You must read the material before you do it. What I'm going to do is set this so that my little divot that I made is in the corner and straight up. My part is standing straight up. I can use an angle plate I can use a 1, 2, 3 block. I'm using the 1, 2, 3 block because it's magnetized and it's easy. I can now read from a 0 reading here up at 1/1000th of an inch increments for whatever height I'm looking for. I have to convert all of the readings here and here. We've got to convert them into decimal. So if it says 9/16, we divide 9 by 16 and it gives us a decimal 562 if I'm thinking correctly. Okay? So you need to do that right now. You need to convert all of these fractions into decimals because that's how this machine works. It does not read fractionally. All right? Pause. All right, so we'll see that I've converted all of our fractions into decimal, but I didn't put the inches there because inch and 7/16 is going to be 1.4375. I told you earlier that our height gauge reads in thousandths of an inch. These are 1/2 of an inch. So all we do, we take off all the 5s that are 4th decimal places because we can't read that tight. We can't. That makes it a little easier for us, right? Now it's only 3 decimal places. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to find my height from the bottom here to the first hole, D. I'm going to find that it is 5/16 of an inch. 5/16 is decimal 312. I take my height gauge and I find 300,000ths of an inch. Then I go up the sliding scale, 12 thou, and I line it up to a line beside it. Decimal 312. Lock it down a little bit. Come over to my part. Now, I saw on hole D, decimal 312, which is 5/16, but our distance to that hole is going to be, let's see, from this edge, 3 1/4 inches. To find 3 1/4 inches, I use a straight edge. I lay it out on the inch scale. From the corner of my part, and at 3 1/4 inches, I scribe a line that's only about 1/4 of an inch long. If I go all the way across my part, then when I go to my next scale, I'm going to leave an awful jigsaw puzzle for somebody to figure out where the holes go. So I want to make sure that I make very, very short lines all the way along my part. Now we're going to shut this off now so I can progress because you've seen how I find my length this way and you've seen how I get my height very, very precise this way. Okay, so next time you see me, I'll have little X marks everywhere there need to be. Pause. Okay, so the next thing we're going to do is use our prick punch or center punch to leave a mark every place where X and Y meet each other. So I take my punch, and I put it on an angle so I can see both lines in the intersection, tilt it up, give it a little tap, boom. That's all it takes at each intersecting line, except that one I told you about at the beginning of our part over here. If I punch here, I won't get the mark back out again. I don't want that to happen. So I've put tape here with a little tiny area that I can pull on by doubling the tape over so that it comes off easy again. And I've done it here too, just to show you guys. There's a piece of tape right there. But really, I can punch this mark. If I do this one, it's forever. We don't want it to be there. So I'm just going to carefully punch each of the holes. You'll notice that I'm not hitting hard, right? It doesn't take very much pressure at all. All I'm doing is allowing a spot for the center punch to go later before I drill. Prick punch is for precision. Center punch is for leaving the angle that I need to start my drill bits. verify, using this, that I have all the holes in the right locations. They're all there. So the next thing I want to do is set this for my first radius. I think I'll do the 1/2 inch radius first. I take my tape measure or measuring tool, put it on one of the lines that's at 1/2 inch, and I close this until the second leg is on the 1 inch mark. That's a 1/2 inch radius. Radius is half a diameter. I come in and touch off on my tape. I scribe a line carefully around the rad. Carefully. It's kind of tricky. Can you see that? Kind of tricky. That's the rad we're looking for. My next rad is going to be 1.25 inches. 1 inch 250. This one's easier because I've got a center hole to punch into. Next, I want to take my scriber, lay out so that I can see both of my radii. I scribe a line from one to the other. I'm going to pull this tape off. I'm going to pull this tape off. If we look at our part right now, we can see almost the whole drill gauge other than the angle. What angle is that? A standard drill gauge, a standard drill is going to be 118 degree included angle at the tip. We want half of that. That's 59 degrees. Now I'm using this tool set at 59 degrees to scribe a line that intersects is, and the line it intersects is B. So I'm going to take my scriber, scribe a line. Oh my goodness. There is my laid out drill gauge, start to finish in entirety. You see that? Now I'm going to the bandsaw. Wait a second. If I cut out this part, how am I going to hold it to drill all the holes? Maybe it'd be a good idea to figure out what all the drill sizes are next. Remember, if it's a 1/4 thread and I drill a 1/4 inch hole, there's not going to be any thread. We need to make sure we use a drill index and we figure out the drill sizes for tap sizes and drill them according to leave about, let's see, 75% thread contact area in it. When you go look at the drill charts, it'll show you. Okay? Pause. Alright, so the next thing I want to talk about is housekeeping. That means keeping our work area clean. Notice that this isn't as clean as it could be. I'm going to clean it before I start. When you guys are done, you need to clean it up to be cleaner than it was when you started. Alright, so I'm going to take my little paintbrush from 1924. That's before most of you were born, I'm pretty sure. And clean my table. When I'm done, we vacuum the floor too. We set up so that our part is in a vise. There's other ways of clamping your part down too, but the vise is the easiest way for us. So I take my part, I make sure that it's at the top of the jaws. Some of you are probably going to find parallels or something to put under it to hold it nice and straight. I just basically give it a little feel to make sure that it's not high anywhere. Tighten it down so it can't go anywhere. Set up for my smallest drill size because that's the highest speed at which the machine's going to run. So I go through and find my little tiny drill bit here that is hole B, 3/32 of an inch. Put it in the drill chuck. Tighten it up with a key. I unplug my drill, open it up. With it unplugged, it can't bite me. There's no way for somebody to accidentally turn it on. Nobody's going to get hurt changing the RPMs. I'm going to set this for very high RPMs, but in order to develop the formula, years and years of practice happened, and they determined that cutting speed times 4 divided by the diameter of the drill bit is the speed at which the part's supposed to be turning. So cutting speed for mild steel is 100 times 4 is 400. 400 over this drill bit that is 3/32 is going to be really freaking fast. Okay? So I'm going to set this to, wait a second, there's nothing here that says really freaking fast. Can you guys do the math, figure out the RPM, and look at this to see what RPM it should be spinning at? I'm going to just set it at 2,080 RPMs, because I'm thinking that's pretty close, but prove me wrong, please. I've loosened the motor so it can slide. I'm changing my RPMs by changing the belt positions. I'm looking for D2. D is the bottom one here. That's D, and 2 is going to be the second from the top here. Oops. All right, so position D and 2. I tighten up the little thumb screws. I shut this, and I should be ready for RPMs now for the smallest hole. Clint, you forgot the center drill. Well, the reason I forgot my center drill is because the center drill is too big for the smallest drill, so it doesn't matter. I did that on purpose. I'm going to find my small hole here. Line up so that it's close. Make sure that I can go down as far as I want to. If I need to, I can actually raise the table too. I'm going to start it up. That's my first hole drilled. What did I forget? I know what I forgot. Oil. We don't want the drill bits to wear out. We give it a little bit of oil so that it keeps it cool and so it lubricates it. This is a very, very small drill bit. I did something called pecking, where we go slowly up and down. It clears the chips. It keeps it cool. This tiny drill bit wasn't spinning as fast as it should. You don't use much pressure. You let the drill bit do all the work. You'll notice I haven't broken my drill bit, and it's still nice and sharp for that one hole, but I should have used a little bit of coolant on it. Make sure you use coolant. My next drill bit. This one comes out. Next size up is going to be this one. This one says 1/8. That's G drill. G hole is way over here. 1/8 is the same size as the tip on my center drill. Should I use the center drill? I think I'll use the center drill instead of this drill bit. Now what I'm going to do is there's a little angle here on the center drill. I'm going to make that angle bite into the part just a tiny little bit, and it deburrs my part for me, makes it so there's no sharp edge there. Do you remember what I forgot last time? Pretty sure you do. I'll give you a hint. It's orange. Little drip of oil. Turn on machine. Did I forget to change my RPM? I think if you did cutting speed of 100 times 400, over a diameter of 125, you'd find out that it's still around that 2000 RPM mark. Okay? So what I'm going to do now is do my math. Can you pause for a second? I just wound up in a little bit of trouble because my eyes are getting bad and I can't read this drill anymore. How do we know the drill size? Well, I'm looking for, on our print, 832. It looks like number 29. So I'm going to find number 29 drill on here. 29. Our diameter is 0.136. So I take a precision measuring tool. I measure across flats. Oh my goodness, this is the drill bit that I was looking for. I've just measured and verified across the cutting edges to make sure that it is number 29 at 136. So I'm going to cut this hole next after I use the center drill. A lot of people slow this down with their hands. That's a no-no. We don't touch rotating machinery with our hands. Now I'm going to find my next hole size. You might notice I'm not telling you my hole size or position because I want you guys to go to the charts and I want you to go to the blueprints. And I want you to understand rather than me walking you through the whole thing, okay? So I'm going to shut off the camera now and finish drilling the holes, and then we'll come back to the next step. Just on a side note, I'm drilling my biggest hole. It's right around 1/4 inch, right? It's 257, I think. So when I drill this hole, if the drill bites and it tries to pull this part out, don't try to catch it with your hands. Just shut it off. Then we can undo it, get it out, and fix everything up for you. Any drill bit that's bigger than 1/4 inch, we're supposed to be using a clamp like this one. Slides in, clamps on our vise, this one's been played with enough that it doesn't quite work anymore. But what we're supposed to do is make it so the vise can't spin on us and hurt somebody. If you look at your textbook, it says to make it so that this piece of the vise is touching the column so it can't spin. Alright, so I'm going to continue on with this, pecking. That's the last of my holes. Now I'm ready to tap. Okay? So when I go to tap, if I'm in a production shop, I'm going to have a tapping head set up on this machine. It's going to have a clutch built into it, and it's going to tap each hole independently. As I pull down, it'll turn one direction. When I go to lift up, it'll spin the other direction and take it out. Some people put their tap in here and don't tighten very tight. Then it'll slip a little bit, but it damages the jaws on our chuck. So what I want you to do is, by hand, on one of our vices, use, what's the L-shaped thing called again? Well, I want you to read that too. So what we're going to do is we're going to take our, now I'm drawing a blank. Yeah, square. We're going to take our square and we're going to make sure that every tap is straight up and down in all angles, in all directions. Your teacher's going to check and make sure that when these holes are tapped, they're tapped straight. Okay, so you're going to make sure that you square them first. You could use your student card. You could use a credit card or a debit card. It's just got to be a perfect right angle in order to tap these holes. And don't forget to use tapping solution, or else you're going to break your taps, and they're in your kit. Okay, don't break your taps. Pause. Alright, so I've picked your smallest tap to show you that we're not going to break the tap. Taps are brittle and they break fairly easily. So what I want to do is first make sure that my hole is the right size. You guys saw me do that in the last segment, so we're not going to worry about measuring, but we could measure and just make sure if somebody else drilled the hole, for instance. Next, I want to take my tap and make sure that it has a taper. Here, I see about 5 or 6 of the little cutting edges that are ground off a tiny little bit to allow for clearance in the hole. So it'll start. I want to hold it straight up. I want to turn it in with a little bit of downward pressure for a whole turn. Now that I've got it in a turn, I can take the tap handle off. I can pull out my handy dandy debit card. I can make sure that it's square that way. I can make sure it's square that way. If our camera was over here, you would see there's 1/8 of an inch at the bottom that isn't square. But because I'm only one turn in, I can easily pull it over just a little tiny bit so that it's straight. What we might want to do is get a buddy to stand at the side and a buddy to stand at the front to direct us so that it doesn't get offset on us. Other things we could do, we could drill a hole straight through a piece that's much larger. Then when I put our tap in, it would be running perpendicular to my work. It's a bit of a cheater. We don't have them. You guys shouldn't need them. We want you to learn how to do it this way. So I'm going to turn it in a little bit more. This is starting to get stiff. Why? Because I forgot to turn it out a quarter turn. It just made a ticking noise. It broke off a little tiny sharp edge inside, and I can continue on. For every half turn in, you want to turn back a quarter turn. You'll feel it break off in there. For every half turn in, for every half turn in. Pretty soon, you can feel the pressure goes away because it's all the way through the part. Right now, I'm clearing out the rest of that hole. If I take my handy devil square here, my handy square, let's line up that way. Uh-oh, and missed here again. That's a crooked hole that's going to lose some marks. I'm going to take the hit for that. It's only going to be a mark, probably, not very much. Okay, so what's that going to do? When I take a screw and put it in that hole, the screw head hits the bottom, it's going to rub on one side, and when I torque it, it's going to put undue stress on the screw. That's not good for a machine application, right? Now I'm going to tap the rest of the tapped holes, and we'll continue on with you. Okay, so the next part of this, after tapping the holes and laying out our part, drilling all the holes, is going to be cutting out our project. If I'm not careful, I could cut my fingers. If I'm not careful, I could make my part undersized or leave marks in it that don't come out. I think careful is the big step when it comes to bandsaw. I want to leave a little bit of material for filing, but only a tiny bit, because the more I leave on here, the longer it's going to take me to file it, and we can't use power tools. We can't. We've got to learn how to use a file properly. You might notice that my part is starting to get a stained appearance. It's starting to lose its bluing. If you've had to leave this in your toolbox, you should use a prick punch and leave marks all the way around our part, so when I come back the next day and this bluing's gone, I still know where to cut. Those prick punch marks have to be far enough away from the line that they don't leave an indentation that won't come out. Get your teacher to show you how to do that, okay? We want to make sure we're about 30 thousandths of an inch away from our line, so then when we cut with the bandsaw, it takes that away and it's gone, but you've got something to cut to for later, okay? So I'm going to start cutting. Now, you'll notice that there's some radiuses. And a bandsaw can do radiuses, but the thickness of our bandsaw means it can't get all the way around a rad nice and even. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start my bandsaw on a flat and push a little bit to leave a mark. Then I'm going to come in until I'm just at the radius or not quite touching it. I'm going to leave a whole bunch of little tooth marks. I'll show you in a minute, okay? I have a push tool that keeps my hands away from the blade. I make sure that the push tool can do its job by putting it right here, loosening this, and moving my guard down so that I can still move my push tool. It keeps me safe as much as possible, and then I lock this in place again. When I turn on my bandsaw, surface feet per minute is important. We need you to read up on the bandsaw and understand how to set it. There is a foot pedal on this machine down at the bottom. This foot pedal determines the RPMs, and there's a guard or there's a sign here that tells us for different metals what the surface feet per minute should be. So I'm going to turn this on. Use this. So you can see, as I go around a corner, each of these little pieces comes off and allows clearance for me to be able to get tighter around the corner. If you look at my saw cut, you can actually see the line that's a scribe line right beside it that isn't very much filing. It's only going to take a few minutes for me to file this out when I'm done. The more you leave on here, the more filing you have to do later. See this little hole right here? If I push too hard, I'm going to leave a cut mark in that hole. So when I get near the hole, I want to stop pushing and let the saw just vibrate along until it starts to penetrate through the hole. Then I'm going to pull back and I'm going to do my other line here and do the same thing so that I don't accidentally cut into my hole. Okay, that's where I'm going now. Does that look familiar? Pause. Alright, so now we've cut it out on the bandsaw and it's time for us to start shaping it with a hand file. Do you think we should use a fine file or a coarse file to start? I see I have about 30 or 40 thousandths of an inch here that I have to remove. Now, I've made it so that my part is set up so that the line that I've drawn with my scribing tool is right at the jaw of the vise, so I can't go beyond it by mistake. This is fairly smooth if you guys haven't filed it too many times in the past. You might want to check and make sure. Anyway, I'm going to take my coarse file. We talked about filing before. We have to make sure there's a handle on the file. You guys have read the chapter. We're going to take our file, hold it so it's not this way and not this way, nice and straight. We're going to file our part without filing into this surface. Now for new people, I suggest some people using a file that doesn't have a cutting surface here. That's a lathe file, but your toolkit doesn't have a lathe file, so well, you're going to have to be very, very careful not to accidentally hit here. Alright, so I'm taking this file, I'm applying a little bit of pressure, I'm using the whole file to remove material until I get very close to the jaws. Once I get very close to the jaws, then I want to switch to a finer file. If I press too hard on this file, it's going to break along these lines. It's going to cut me, probably right here. That's a bad place to cut yourself. Don't put too much pressure on your file, or you're going to hurt yourself. Could you grab a file card for me? The file card is the cleaner that we talked about earlier when we were filing. We're going to use the bristle section. Now there's a little bit of controversy. Some people prefer to pull, and these stainless bristles pull through the teeth. Some people prefer to push. I don't care which way you do it, as long as you keep your file clean. it doesn't matter. And then there's the non-wire part to finish it off. Now, you can use chalk in here as a lubricant. You don't use a spray lubricant or an oil. If you do, it's going to cause pieces to stick in here. It's called pinning. Please read the chapter on files. How do I know that I'm getting close to the line? I'm getting close to the jaws of the chuck. While I still have material to be removed, I want to take my part out. I want to use a straight edge. I want to check to make sure that I'm still nice and straight. Oh my goodness, I can't see light under this. That's perfect. I'm getting close to my line, and I can see that my line is farther away from my file marks here than it is here. I've got to file more at this side in order to keep my angle of 59 degrees. Go. Course file. Fine file. Draw filing. Cleaning the file. How do I know when to clean the file? When it's not biting anymore. Then it's time to clean the file. Deburring my part. I want to check to make sure this line is nice and straight. Do you remember how to do that? I think has to do something not sniffing the marker. Do you remember that part? Can you see where I'm not touching? It says I've got to focus on here and here, and in here is a little bit too low right now. I don't want to take any material away from here. Now if I focus too much on this end, it's going to start to dive. We don't want that to happen either. So we take a few scratches, draw filing, and we're using different areas of the file frequently so that we're not wearing out any one area of the file. We come to this end and we do the same thing. Can you see that it's starting to improve? So we have a lot more surface area here touching and a little bit here. We need to remove from here and here, but not here, right? Starting to touch everywhere. Very, very close. So what I do now is I take my straight edge, I hold it up to the light, and I can see I still need to work a little bit more on this end here and this end here, just a tiny little bit. Oops, wrong file. Don't use the coarse one, it's going to make a mess. Oh my goodness, that looks so pretty. I think I would give myself a 9 out of 10 for straight. If you want to take more time, you can get a better mark. Okay, so now I've done this edge, and I've done this edge. And if I look very carefully, I can still see my lines. Now your grade is dependent upon having a 59 degree plus or minus half a degree. We have precision bevel protractors that have a magnifier that we can use in order to determine that it's just right. Another way to do it is to use my specialty tool right here. We had these designed, they're cut out on a laser cutter. This angle here should match, and it does. There it is. 59 degrees without even trying, really. It's just following the lines and paying attention to what you're doing and taking your time. There's not much to it. Next, I want to do this radius here. Filing a radius sounds easy, but if I take my file and I accidentally go too far onto the flat, you can't add more material. So you've got to take more flat off. This flat doesn't have a critical dimension. There's nothing important going on here. What we're looking for is a smooth transition from the rad to the flat and from the flat to the rad. You want it to be nice looking. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this nice and straight. How did I do that again? Put it in the vise so I can see the line. How do we protect our part so we don't leave marks in it? 1, you cannot over tighten. 2, you can use soft aluminum jaws. Taking the sharp edges off. Making it so I can see this little radius here. If I leave it standing too high out of the vise, it makes a terrible noise. You want to hear it? It's kind of fun. Let's do it. That's harmonics, and it annoys everybody. So what we want to do is make sure that it's in the vise nicely. We want to make sure that we can see what's going on. We want to take our course file. You'll notice that I'm making a rounding motion right now. Every stroke is a forward stroke. There is no backstroking. I want to start at my tip. And I want to slowly blend in to this line here. Once I get close to the line, I go to my fine file. There's that terrible sound I was talking about. How do we get rid of that sound? Move farther down into the vise. Oh, that's a much better terrible sound. We want to make sure that this angle here is flat as possible. I take this angle. Oh my goodness, look at that. Does that look all right to you? I think I got a little bit more to go, but it's pretty darn close. I think that's another 8.5 or 9 out of 10. It's not perfect. So if you choose to hand it in now, I'm thinking that this part is worth about 80%, roughly, as it sits, pretty much. But you can work harder to make it nicer. Taking the sharp edges off so my teacher doesn't cut himself. That's important. Blending in that angle that I was talking to you about to make sure that my teacher doesn't see that I might have been a little crooked. Double checking my radius. Oh, I'm done on that one. Now we got to finish this one, and it needs a lot of love. If we look here, you can see the radius it's supposed to be. Oh, it's pretty close. What kind of filing am I doing? I think that's draw filing again, right? Oh my goodness. There's another 8.5 out of 10. That's 85%. I don't know. I'm not happy with 85. I can work a little more. All right, so I have a lovely looking part here. Very, very closely matches the laser cut part that was done on a CNC machine. Every hole lines up in the same position. The angle's the same. The radiuses are very, very close. If I was to hand in this project right now, I can expect a little more than 85% perhaps. If I want to take it that extra mile, I do a surface finish on here that prevents it from rusting. It's not just paint, it's polish. I'm going to get some Scotch-Brite or some fine emery. I'm going to use a little bit of water or oil, and I'm going to make it so I can almost see my bald head on here. If it's really polished, you guys are going to get a few bonus marks for finish. It's already a suitable finish. If you were to buy this at Sears or Canadian Tire or Princess Auto, for instance, you'd be happy with the look of it. You'd be all right. But if you want something that's a classy tool, you spend a little extra time on finish. Go to your teacher and learn how to finish it.